segment 3, Gold and Black Live. Mike Babinski, we just let him go, and our off-topic conversations are probably even more interesting than our on-topic, but it's always interesting and great to have him on. Matt Stevens joins us for segment 3, and Brian Neubert returns to the big show here. And Matt, rain is a funny thing, but can change football games, but it's an important game for Purdue tomorrow. I mean, the Boilermakers need to do well and obviously get the win, but also maybe take some steps forward.
Yeah, in one sense, it's a math problem because you look at the schedule and it literally and figuratively doesn't get any easier than Saturday. The second part of it is that you're coming off a game last week where you had this emotional high before they ever kicked off a football, and then 30 minutes in, you're kind of like, here we go again. And so I think you need to emotionally kind of get that, almost wash that away as well. And I think wash that away is probably a good analogy for what we're going to have on Saturday.
Yeah.
But I think Purdue fans, Purdue players, Purdue coaches just want to go see as clean a game as possible in the type of weather you're going to go see. And what I mean by that is just no turnovers, limit the mistakes a little bit, limit the penalties as much as you can, and just play a cleaner game against an Eastern Michigan team that's going to come in thinking, not thinking, but knowing they can beat a Big Ten team after beating Rutgers in their place last year. So this is no pushover, and there are a lot of things that Purdue coaches feel like they can get better at real quick, and I think that's what they're looking for on Saturday.
Yeah, Brian, you look at the quarterback situation. It's obviously talked about on almost an hourly basis, but looking back at Sindelar's situation or his 3 picks, but and then yet he did some things well. Blau did some things well. What do you expect? They've already been guaranteed that they're both going to play. At least that's what the coach says. But how do you view that?
Yeah, I just think that what Elijah Sindelar did last week, the mistakes he made were not him.
Yeah.
His body work prior to that game last season was not that. Now we don't know what happened in practice. There were some interception issues apparently during scrimmages and stuff. But I would have to think, I would be prone to believe, I should say, that that's probably an aberration more than it is his new reality. So I would kind of chalk that up to maybe a one-game thing. It's just there are some really interesting dynamics with him. One, this was his first game back in a while where he was playing fully healthy. We asked him about that a little bit. I don't think there's anything to that. I can't pin the interceptions on that, but that's
it's a fact.
Who knows? It's a fact. It's something different. If you want to try to diagnose differences between what happened in Game 1 to what was happening in Game 3, the differences were A, Sindelar's healthy, and B, David Blau's back. So there's that competition again. I don't know if either of those factored into him maybe trying to do a little too much on a couple of those interceptions or what, but those were not what he was at the end of last season. So I would tend to chalk that up to just a one-game blip.
All right, the phenomenon, Matt, that is Rondale Moore in Week 1, and it was. I mean, it's hard not to say that it was anything short of that. On a rainy field, but in all likelihood tomorrow. But this kid is very, very special. It seems from every indication. Will we see? I don't know. We'll see 313 yards in all-purpose yards tomorrow, but you're going to see something out of him just about every time he plays.
He needs to be a big impact Saturday and Saturdays in the future for 3-4 years at Purdue. There's no doubt about that. I don't care if it's rain, sleet, snow, sunshine. Rondale Moore needs to touch the football, and touched a lot. And I talked in our pregame show last week with Kyle Charters in our over/under, and he gave me 11.5 touches for Rondale Moore.
Total?
13.
Okay.
And I thought 11.5 was amazingly high, and I was going to go 1-0 in my debut. And sure enough, I'm 0-1 because Jeff Brom realizes very, very quickly he's different. And they're treating him differently in practice and immediately like he's a different human being, because he is a different human being. And he's going to affect this program in so many different ways, whether it's special teams, whether it's leadership. He's affecting it leadership-wise now as a true freshman after one game, and understands that last week wasn't acceptable because they lost. I don't care if I broke a record or not. I do think Rondale Moore is going to break his own record in all-purpose yards repeatedly at Purdue, but I also think he's changing. When you talk about changing a culture, Jeff Brom does it from the sidelines in year 1. I think Rondale Moore and a host of other guys are going to have to do it from the field in year 2.
I think something to monitor throughout the rest of the season, and maybe the rest of Rondale Moore's career, is kind of what I guess I'll call the Rondale Moore effect. how many runs up the middle get busted because him coming across for that fake jet sweep is going to just completely wig out the defense.
Yeah.
How many deep shots can Purdue maybe get to an Isaac Zico or a Terry Wright or a Jared Sparks because there's attention on Rondell Moore? I shouldn't have listed Jared Sparks third. He's a really good player.
Yes, he is.
A really good player. That shouldn't be lost in what Rondell Moore did last week. But what I'm saying is that, I always compare it to kind of driving on ice on the interstate, that after you've done it for a while, it just wears you out, having to be hyper aware of something, having to be uber careful. Mm-hmm. And you wonder if Rondell Moore is just going to be one of those guys that defenses are going to have to put so much attention into that it's going to wear defenses out. It's going to fry them. It's going to open up opportunities for or just the simple fact that they're going to have to pay so much attention to him, that's going to be a little less attention being paid to somebody else, and that's going to afford somebody else an opportunity to do something. So it's not just the plays Rondell Moore makes, but maybe the plays Rondell Moore makes for other people, or contributes to at least.
Yeah, offensive line, another area that we've debated a little bit this week in terms of what we saw in week one and what needs to happen. We expect, Matt, to see more guys play tomorrow, more than the 5, one would think. But tell me about what your evaluation was, and I'll throw it to Brian after this, but in terms of what you want to see from that offensive line in a game that you may need to run the football, in theory, more than you might think.
Yeah, in theory, I think this is a game that sets up well for Purdue because not only do I think they're pretty good from guard to guard, up the middle in their offensive line, but I also know that Eastern Michigan has very, very undersized linebackers in the second level. So if Purdue can get to the second level in their running game, they're going to bust some big plays if they can manage to do that. The problem was on the outside, and Jeff Brom knows right now that goal number 1 right now for Purdue's offensive line is to be able to either A, get their offensive tackles better in practice so that they can hold blocks longer so that they can throw the ball vertically down the field deeper like they want to,
sure.
Or B, get them some help, whether that's with a running back, whether that's with a tight end, or something schematically that can allow them to do just that again. Because if Grant Hermans and if Eric Swingler are going to continue to struggle, they're going to need some help. And the thought process is those are 2 inexperienced guys on the outside, and they just need more reps and they need more practice, and they will get better. But in a game like this where you're going to have constant deluge of rain and maybe 30-mile-an-hour winds, you may rely on your guard, center, and guard to get a push. And I think Kirk Barron, you could see in the Gold and Black on Big Ten Network this week, was yelling at the offensive line after halftime, we got to get a push. And I think that the offensive line wants to go forward more than have to backpedal and pass rush like they did last week. And I think you could see that on Saturday.
Yeah.
I think the offensive line gets made better, too, in pass protection when you get your running game going, because then your play action becomes more credible.
Yeah.
You get your screen game going a little bit. That at least gives those ends something more to think about. Also, Northwestern's good. Those are 2 very good pass rushers Purdue's tackles struggled with, and might be one of the – I don't know if I want to say that's the best pair of edge rushers they'll see all year, but it's certainly going to be one of the top 2 or 3 most likely. So maybe that warps reality a little bit in terms of what Purdue really is at this stage of the season, to have played an opponent like that right away.
Yeah, and Alan, Eastern Michigan has 2 of the best pass rushers in the Mid-American Conference as well. Max Crosby is going to be a guy that's going to
be back, right?
Yeah, and he got suspended for the opener against Monmouth, but he will be back at Ross State Stadium on Saturday. He's an NFL guy. He's a guy that's either going to be on a practice squad or get drafted, later next April, and a guy that, or in an upcoming April draft, because he's only a junior right now. So he's a guy that they have as a first-team All-MAC player. He's going to go up against one of those offensive tackles all day and he's going to try to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, keep your eye on number 92. Now we're going to take a two-minute break and ask Brian, because we have to answer questions from you. All right, Brian, this is from Greg. Does Purdue get Newman? We're talking about Brandon Newman after.
I don't know.
After last.
I don't know.
This is what
It's a
Brian
good
wants
question.
to hear.
I mean,
And set up what happened, just for those that have been under a rock. Obviously we were recruiting last night. Darman Franklin commits to Indiana.
Purdue's had offers out to 2 guards in state, Armand Franklin and Brandon Newman. Armand Franklin was all but committed, and that went sideways on Purdue. And he ended up committing to Indiana last night. There was a dynamic there where Purdue was recruiting both of the guards to come to Purdue together, trying to get them both to come together. So when you bring them in for the official visit together, you're gearing your message, at least to some extent, to getting these guys to feel like they can play together, to make that something they want to do. Armand Franklin, that argument kind of fell apart last night when he committed to Indiana. So now it's just down to Brandon Newman. Brandon Newman in no way is priority number 2 here. This was 1A, 1B, and the 2 were interchangeable. So it's not like Purdue loses Armand Franklin, so they turn to Brandon Newman. They wanted both of these guys the same. They just wanted them together, and they wanted them to feel like they could play together at Purdue, and they could both, thrive on the same roster. Now, Brandon Newman's the only one standing. So now Purdue obviously is going to continue to recruit him, just like it was recruiting him before. Nothing changes, except for the fact that the obstacle of trying to get 2 players at the same position in the same class, technically, is off the table. So all of the same stuff that they've been hammering away at to Brandon Newman remains in place. Proximity to home matters. I think Purdue was a school he really liked early. I think it has a lot going for it still. I would think Purdue would probably be right up there at the top, if not the favorite. I think Xavier is going to be hard to put in the ground, so to speak. I think it's going to be one of those 2. Ohio State's the other school left standing here. I don't think he's going to Ohio State. He canceled his visit apparently, or Indiana canceled his visit there this weekend apparently. I don't think he was going to Indiana personally. I think it was Purdue. It's Purdue and Xavier, and still is. Xavier will get the last visit, I believe, and then I think it'll come down to those 2. The thing here is that, he was going to go to prep school. He decided to stay in Valparaiso because his mom's dealing with some health issues. So if that dynamic is at play, being an hour down the road could conceivably be something that is a significant advantage to Purdue. Not the kind of advantage you necessarily want to have, because obviously a family is dealing with some circumstances, but still an advantage nonetheless. But I do think Purdue's put itself in a good position. You just worry that the time you spent recruiting the 2 of them together maybe is something that works against you over time, now that that kind of hypothetical has fallen apart. Armand Franklin goes on his Indiana visit. They spend the whole time talking about Armand Franklin and trying to tear down Purdue, which they did effectively. Whereas Purdue brings Newman and Franklin in together, is talking to them, at least to some extent, as a tandem, and not as individuals, exclusively, like Indiana was talking to Armand Franklin. I think Purdue's going to have a real good shot at Brandon Newman, but I think Xavier's going to be tough to shake, and we won't know for at least a couple weeks because he's got a couple more visits.
All right.
Now, a long answer to a short question.
That's all right. No, you're right. We gave
It's the exact reason why nobody at Purdue wanted to hear about quarterback news at Thursday at 7.
That is true. Matt, a question also about from the chat room on what when talking to Nick Holt this week and hearing what he had to say, what do you think they'll do schematically or differently in the defensive line to get the defensive line to maybe get more push or be better? I know it's not a simple answer, but what do you think? Is it going to be scheme? Is it going to just be coaching up the ends? What has to happen?
Well, you almost answered it, Al, in your question, which is simple. I think Nick Holt looks at his defensive scheme and says, the simpler we can get right now, that's what we have to do. And I think it's going to be more base 4-3 stuff. I think he likes 3 linebackers right now that he can put on the field right now a lot. And also I think you're going to see more Tobias Larry. So you could see maybe 3 or 4 linebackers he likes to play. You're not going to have Simeon Smiley at nickel, so you got to move Antonio Blackman to nickel. So that takes one person out of your depth in the secondary. I asked him about the pass rush, and it's the same answer we've been getting since about August 1st when they started camp. It's still a work in progress, and it's not where they want it to be. And my concern, Al, is I've never seen a good or average defense have a bad pass rush, and Purdue has a bad pass rush right now. And so those guys, this is not the NFL. I know it's a cliche. There are no trades, and there are no free agency. You got to do it with the guys you got, and they've just got to get better.
Yeah, that was the exact point I'd make. Is you can't make Giovanni Rivera 2 years older.
Right,
you can't add weight, size, and strength and experience to these guys. You have to make the best of it, what you have. You have to let guys play through mistakes. You have to coach around your deficiencies. That's easier said than done at the line of scrimmage, but it is Purdue's reality, and it's not going to change wholesale overnight.
But I will add what Brian said is that you can – I know it's hard for fans to do, but you have to allow for players to get better throughout the course of a season because that does happen. They don't stay at the same rating like a video game throughout the entire – Giovanni Rivera is going to get better. Kai Higgins is going to get better. Robert McWilliams is going to get better. But they need them to get better a lot quicker. And I think the main message that I asked out of Nick Holt on Wednesday was, don't stand around. Go make a play. And I think Purdue got caught in the first half, especially up front, standing around and watching and not understanding the speed of Big Ten play and Division I Power 5 conference play. I don't think that same mistake is going to happen as much in Game 2 as it did in Game 1.
All right, well, there'll be more on that subject, I would guess, about every week here for the rest of the season, just in terms of how how the defensive line will work. All right, we are done for today's show. Predictions will be on the site shortly, or are they on now? No, not now. Shortly. So we're going to spare you. You just come to the website and find out who we think will win tomorrow, and that you can just take right to the bank. But no, we appreciate Brian Neubert, Matt Stevens, and we want to thank our sponsors, also Triple X, John Basham, the good folks at Basham Rental, Hilton Garden Inn, and of course State Farm agent Trent Johnson. And we want to thank Gordon for all his work to make this show happen, and of course Mike Babinski for spending 40 minutes of his day with us. I'm sure he doesn't ponder anything place he'd rather be than right here, so we will appreciate that too. So we'll see you next week. Jason Vitacofer will join us. We may have another guest also in tow as we'll be preparing for Purdue and Missouri in a night game a week from Saturday tomorrow for the Eastern Michigan Big Ten Network at noon, Ross-Ade Stadium. So have a great week, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you missed part of the show, we'll have the segments broken down by segments. Gordon does a great job doing that. You can watch the replay, and that will probably be up in the next hour or so on our site. So thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you next week on Gold and Black Live.